The Sutton Hoo Queen. The Queen stood, bristling with gold and glorious ornament. The embroidery at the hem and sleeves of her robe, jewel colours of red and blue, were caught in the light from the tapers and heaped hearth fire. The gold rings on her fingers sparkled. The only thing that glittered more brightly than the ornaments bedecking her person was the fire sparkle in her eyes. She was looking at one thing, one person, the king, Radwold. He had been in the Great Mead Hall for some time now. He had addressed his men, then his musicians had played, and the court poet, the shop, had told some of the great tales to the assembled lords. Of Woofer, the wolf, first king of the East Angles. The shop gave a tally of their ancestral line, those war-wise heroes who had fought giants and dragons and men across the seas. The shop had then recited a piece of history about the fairest queen, her, and her people, the East Saxons. "Great queen," he'd warbled, plucking at his lyre, "arrayed in gold, beautiful to behold, most gracious in form and thought." Peace Weaver, he'd called her, because her marriage to Radwold had tied bonds of kinship between the noble kingdoms of Essex, the East Saxons, and East Anglia. Instructing the shop to tell this story was canny work on the part of her husband, she would own that. It was unusual and an honour for a whole turn to be devoted to her. But still, a pretty poem would not fix this. She didn't feel like a peace weaver tonight. She wanted a fight. Here's why. The trouble had begun a month ago. Radwold had returned from a visit to her cousin Ethelbert, the powerful king of the East Saxons. As soon as Radwold had ridden back through the gates of the royal palace, he'd dismounted his horse and fallen to his knees. He had announced in a quavering voice that he had been baptised and was now a Christian. Of course, she had heard about this new faith from the East, worshipping the Christ God. It said there was only one God who was both man and God and spirit at once. This God had a human mother and a divine father and offered eternal life to those who pledged themselves to him, which did sound quite good. She'd heard about this new faith and she knew they were all at it in Essex. She just hadn't thought that Radwold would make such a tit of himself and think what made sense down there in Canterbury would work up here in Anglia. She'd caught the womenfolk in the kitchens, laughing behind their hands about how Radwold's head had been turned. Ooh, exotic incense from the East. It had made him randy and he'd mistaken that urge for a divine presence. Or maybe because the priests of this Christ God wore robes that looked like dresses, spent their days on their knees. That was something fresh to light his eyes upon. A little taste of paradise. Well, she'd slapped one of them, and she scolded the rest, and that soon shut them up. But if the women were gossiping such treasonous poison, then what were the nobles saying about this foolish turn of events? Loyalty. That's how wars were won, how kingdoms were ruled. What loyalty would his people show him if Radwold showed such little loyalty to their gods? There was value in indulging her cousin in Essex. He was now a devout Christian and zealous in his desire to convert others. Because of his faith, the court in Essex enjoyed profitable trade with the Frankish Empire, ruled by the family of his wife Bertha. So, certainly, if Radwold declared himself for this new Christ God, then Essex would remain their closest ally. But what about the fealty of East Anglia's own nobles? You can't just announce the non-existence of the gods, the birth of some new god, and expect everyone to march into bitter and bloody battle with you just as before. Just imagine if Radwold offered the fate of his next battle and his warriors not to Woden, but to this Christ God. And then he was bettered by his foe. What gods would stand alongside a foolish king worshipping a foolish idea? Would they protect him when Anglia's noble families learned their sons had died like dogs and been cursed like demons? Radwold was well loved by his people, and rightly so. He was a strong guardian of his land and his people. But if he cast off their gods, maybe they would cast off him. Radwold wouldn't be turned. "The Christ God is the true God, woman," he said. "What we worshipped before are the dancing shadows of his real creation. We thought they were the gods, but they're not. We were blind to a trick of the light, a flicker of the fire." He had raved. "He is the God of kings. He is a father to his people, as I am to my sons. He is a shepherd to his followers, as I am to my people. My queen," he'd said it with absolute earnestness, "ours is a noble fate, and if we honour him, then we shall be clothed in gold in life and in eternity." Her insistence that he must not turn from the old gods and his loyal people had resulted in one concession. Instead of destroying the temple honouring the gods, which he had wanted to do, he had installed a second altar next to the original. One altar for the gods and another altar for this Christ god. Word had already spread across the kingdom that this was now the remarkable temple with 2 altars. The women had made bawdy jokes about that, too. She had told him that his people were laughing, that he may be the son of wolves, but he had the wits of an ass. But he wouldn't be moved. He said that they would see the light, that she would see the light. Back in the mead hall that evening, bathed in golden light and surrounded by the din of the feast, she did not see. No, she fumed. But the Great Queen knew that this next was her moment. She stepped forward from her place. She held in her hands a large drinking cup made from a bull's horn, polished until it shone moon bright, clasped with bands of silver at the lip and the base. As she walked forward, holding the cup high, the gathered court fell silent. All eyes were on her. This was the ritual of the cupbearer. The most noble lady, the queen, would offer a drink of mead to every one of the warriors in the hall, starting with the king. The rest of the night, the job of serving drinks was, of course, work for the slaves, but this was different. This was not service. This was the giving of a gift. Fighting was man's work, ruling a king's work. Offering the gift of the land, the sweet sustenance of this honey wine, that was her work. And it offered a chance for her to outflank her husband. Now, she had never been on a battlefield, but her wits were as sharp as any blood-tested blade a man might wield. "My lord," she called, "here I bring the sweet wine of summer honey. Drink deep, my lord." She approached the king, and he took the cup. Only she saw the twitch in his eye that meant he was just a little bit nervous about what she might say or do. "Tonight," she looked him square in the eye, "your people drink the honey wine that you give. Through this gift you honour the gods of our ancestors, the givers of the sun, the milk and meat, the hunt, the harvest. Now we are in the high months of the summer. Soon Haligmonath, the holy month, the harvest month, will be upon us. With hope, my lord, it will again be a bounty to sing of. It will prove again the glory of this, your land." The queen swept her arm across the court, gathering in all the nobles who were gazing at her and the king. The king raised the cup to his lips, and the shop raised his lyre, ready to begin a tune to accompany the rest of the cup-bearing rite. But the queen hadn't finished. "What? But now is the time to honour the gods of our ancestors, of you, our hero king, our wolf king." Radwold gingerly brought the cup down again from his lips. "What? But now it is time for us to seek wisdom in what we know to be wise, to stay the course with a strong hand, my lord. The young oak leaf shines the brightest green, but the weather-tested bough is the one to which we stand steadfast. I know, my lord, that you know, my lord, that it is right and proper to give our gods thanks and praise, as we, your people, thank you, our guardian and most excellent lord. May the gods bless this Caught! In the silence, Radwold took a long drink from the mead cup. The gold-bright hall was silent as these two souls matched in warrior worth held each other's gaze. "Well spoken, my peerless queen. Thanks be to God." He smiled. God. He'd said God. Singular, not the gods. Plural. With one word, he'd shown her the depth of his pig-headed idiocy and the failure of her manoeuvre. As soon as she had completed her task of pouring the mead, she pushed through the great oak doors of the hall and stomped into the darkness beyond. Decorum could kiss her arse. If it reflected badly on her husband, then good. He deserved it. If it reflected badly on her, then whosoever dared say it would have to come and say it to her face. That night, the king and queen slept apart. All the next day it rained, and the servants and slaves kept carefully out of the queen's fury-filled path. After many hours she found herself walking in circles and then walking into the herb-thick air of the temple with 2 altars. The new table had been built to match the old one. 2 altars, rich red yew wood both, polished to perfection. The Christ God altar had a flickering oil lamp with gold-gleaming ornament that danced and dazzled in the glow. On the old God's altar were loose strands of herbs from the last offering, and Radwold's helmet, displayed where it was always displayed. It was a marker of victory and of peace. The helmet was only taken from the temple when the war banners unfurled, when the king was forced to break his people's peace and wet once again the bloodthirst blades they fed with the lives of their foes. Radwold was rightly proud of the wonderful goldsmith he kept at the court. It was true, there was no other man who could create such exquisite pieces of gold and garnet work. Radwold had shoulder clasps that made him look like a fancy foreign emperor. He had a new sword pommel and scabbard and decorations for his shield. And of course this, his treasure, his war helmet. It really was a thing of beauty, formed of panels with recurring images of battling warriors and priests dancing sacred rites. A long snake dragon had been shaped to run over the crest of the helmet to defeat the blade of an enemy striking from above. A bird dragon formed the face shape, wings outstretched over the king's eyes. In each piece, the blood-red garnets fit perfectly into the golden frames, like tiny bright blood-jewel tiles. The gold behind the garnets made them flash and sparkle, all in except 2 places, the left eye of the crest dragon and the left eyebrow of the face. It was only a year before that Radwold and the goldsmith had come up with this idea together. The dark eye, the one that didn't reflect the light. Well, it was Woden, who had sacrificed an eye in exchange for wisdom. This helmet represented Woden. It embodied Woden. It was Woden. And when Radwold wore it, he became one with his god. What now, when Radwold had declared himself for a different god? The queen stepped closer to the altar with the helmet. Without quite knowing what she was doing, she took it in her hands, and then she slid it onto her head. If she was seen, how would she explain such behaviour? She didn't know. But all of a sudden the helmet seemed to tighten its grip in a band around her forehead, and then a bright vision burst in her eyes. Time sped around her, and she realised she was in the body of a bird, a raven, the memory messenger of Woden himself. She was slipping out of herself, stretched into another form. And then in front of her a vision as clear as if it were happening. Radwold, triumphant in battle, stained with blood and mud, still strapped into his war-wrought armour. But his hands held 2 swords, his own and another, a fearsome blade, long, beautifully sharp, patterned in the welding of the metal itself. Had he defeated another king? She looked again, and now he held no swords. Instead, he made the mark of the cross, the symbol of this Christ god. She looked again, and he was surrounded by swords, more than he could hold. In this vision, she knew he was ruler of all England, overlord in every kingdom. Then the scene flew, and she flew through the air, up high like a bird, and then down, down into a new vision. She saw herself in a widow's veil by the side of a huge open burial mound. Below her was the river, a river she knew so well. She was in their royal cemetery. She watched as a cohort of men strained on ropes, pulling a vast longboat uphill to the mound. At the centre of the boat was her Radwald, dead, but not a warrior cut in his prime. He was laid out, an old and mighty king in his final war-won rest, surrounded by the gold treasure his smith had made for him. Next to him, alongside his sword and shield, was the war helmet she was wearing herself right now. The eye of Woden winked in the garnet light, the other lay dull and dark. Above the body of her husband stood two men, one the temple priest, and another, she knew him to be a Christ priest. They were offering prayers in different words, but spoken together. Then again, lifted by earth and air, the queen rose up, a raven flying high and fast across the sky, and then, thwum! She landed back in the temple, the thrum of the rain hitting the thatched roof above her. She clawed the helmet from her face and stood for long minutes staring into the face of this god-king's golden head. This was the face of Woden, the one-eyed god, with a crest made from a dragon and the face made from a bird. Woden had enabled her vision, that much was clear. But it had been a vision of her husband, the Christian, becoming ruler of all England. A glorious weird, a glorious fate. They were at the edge of something. Start or end, she did not know. And then she did. Since she was a girl, she had been peace weaver between men. From now, she must be peace weaver between the gods.